Life doesn't always ask before making decisions for us. Sometimes, a single moment arrives and everything changes forever. This story also begins with one such moment. That day, the weather felt strange. It was neither fully night nor fully day. Dark clouds covered the sky, the wind was strong, and the narrow street of the city was completely silent. The girl was walking home from school, just like every other day. She was very young, with innocence on her face and dreams in her eyes. Her school bag hung from her shoulder, her steps were tired, and home was only a short distance away. But she didn't know that this short distance was about to become longer than her entire life. As she reached the turn of the street, she felt something strange, as if someone was nearby. At first, she thought it was just her imagination. Then, she heard footsteps behind her. One step, then another, coming closer. Her heart began to beat faster. She quickened her pace. But the footsteps became faster too. Now, the sound was no longer just the sound. It had turned into fear. She was about to stop and turn around when her school bag slipped from her hand and fell onto the ground. The sound of the bag hitting the ground cut through the silence of the street. And in that very moment, someone grabbed her hand. She screamed, but the street was empty. The wind carried her scream away. She was pulled toward the darkness. In just a few seconds, her entire world shattered into pieces. When she regained consciousness, she found herself in an unfamiliar room. Cold walls, a hard floor, and an unbearable heaviness in the air. Time seemed to have stopped. There was no difference between day and night anymore. There was only fear and endless questions. Why am I here? What was my fault? She tried again and again to gather herself, but when freedom is taken from a person, the first thing that breaks is their sense of safety. Every passing moment was making her weaker. But deep inside that weakness, in some hidden corner, a small spark of strength was being born. She didn't know it yet, but that strength would one day become her identity. The journey of this story had only just begun. And what was coming next was not just pain, but a true test of patience and survival. When she opened her eyes again, she didn't know how much time had passed. Minutes, hours, or maybe days. Time had lost all meaning. The room was small and dim. There were no windows, only a single weak light hanging from above, swaying slightly, as if even it was tired of being there. The walls felt cold, as if they were holding stories of pain within them. She tried to move, but her body felt heavy, unfamiliar. Fear wrapped around her like a tight grip. She listened carefully. Silence. A silence so deep that it made her ears ache. She hugged her knees to her chest and tried to control her breathing. Stay calm. Don't panic. She repeated these words in her mind, again and again, because panic would only make things worse. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered to her, "You have to survive." At times, footsteps echoed outside the room. Every time she heard them, Her heart stopped for a moment. She held her breath, hoping, praying that whoever it was would pass by and not stop. But sometimes the footsteps stopped right outside the door. Those moments felt endless. Her hands trembled. Her entire body froze. She learned something important during those moments. Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it sits quietly beside you, watching. Days passed, or maybe weeks. She couldn't tell. There was no sunlight to count the days, no clock to measure time. Only hunger, exhaustion, and silence. But slowly, something inside her began to change. At first, she cried. She cried quietly, so no one could hear her. Then, one day, the tears stopped coming. Not because the pain was gone, but because her body had learned how to protect itself. That was the day she realized she was still alive. And as long as she was alive, hope still existed. She began to observe everything: the sound of the door, the timing of footsteps, the smallest changes in the air. She memorized details the way prisoners memorize freedom. Not because she had a plan, but because observation gave her control. And control, even the smallest amount, gave her strength. At night, when everything was quiet, she spoke to herself in her mind. She imagined her home, her school, her mother's voice. She imagined a future where this darkness no longer existed. These thoughts became her shield. Without them, she knew she would break. One day, as she lay on the cold floor, she placed her hand on her stomach without realizing why. That moment, something inside her shifted. A strange awareness, a fear greater than before, and yet something else too, a responsibility. She didn't fully understand it yet, but she knew one thing. Her life was no longer only hers. From that moment on, survival was no longer a choice. It became a duty. She promised herself, "No matter how long this dark mist lasts, I will not disappear." Because even in the deepest silence, even in the darkest prison, a human spirit can still learn how to endure. From that moment onward, nothing inside her was the same. Before, she had been surviving for herself. Now, she was surviving for something more, something unseen yet deeply felt. Her days followed a painful rhythm: silence, waiting, fear. But beneath all of it, a quiet determination began to grow. She no longer allowed her thoughts to drift towards hopelessness. Whenever her mind tried to fall apart, she pulled it back. Stay present, she told herself. Stay alive. Her body grew weaker with time, but her awareness became sharper. She noticed how the air felt different at certain hours. She learned which footsteps were heavier, which were faster, and which carried anger. These details mattered. They gave her a sense of time, a fragile routine inside chaos. At night, when sleep refused to come, she imagined holding a child in her arms. She didn't know why the image felt so real, but that image brought warmth to a place that had none. Fear still visited her, Often, it crept in quietly, especially in moments of exhaustion. There were nights when she lay on the cold floor and wondered if she would ever see the sky again. But then a thought would rise. If not for me, then for the life growing inside me. And that thought changed everything. Pain became something she could endure. Hunger became something she could tolerate. Time became something she could wait for. Because waiting meant hope. She began to speak silently, not to anyone outside, but to the child she believed was there. She whispered stories in her mind, simple ones, stories about mornings filled with sunlight, about laughter, about safety. She promised things she herself had never known, and in those promises she found purpose. Days passed, slowly. Her strength faded at times, but her will did not. She understood something important. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply refusing to give up. She stopped counting time by pain. She began counting it by survival. Each breath became a victory. Each morning she woke up was an act of defiance. One evening, as she leaned against the wall, she felt a strange calm. Not peace, but acceptance. She accepted that her past was gone. She accepted that her present was uncertain. But her future still belonged to her and to the child she carried. In that dark place, where silence tried to erase her, she made a decision. No matter what happens, this story will not end here. Because sometimes hope does not come as light. Sometimes hope comes as responsibility. Something changed that week. She couldn't explain it clearly, but she could feel it, like the air itself was shifting. For the first time in a long while, the silence around her felt careless, as if whoever controlled this place had grown comfortable. Careless, and comfort often creates mistakes. She noticed the door was not locked the same way anymore. The sound it made was different, not weaker, just rushed. She noticed footsteps came less often. When they did, they stayed for shorter moments. These were small changes, almost invisible. But to someone who had learned to survive in silence, they meant everything. She did not react immediately. She waited. Waiting had become her greatest skill. She observed, she listened, she remembered, and most importantly, she stayed calm. Because panic destroys opportunity. One night, the light outside her room stayed on longer than usual. The shadows on the walls stretched and shifted. She pressed her ear against the door. Voices. Not clear, but distracted. That was when she realized something important. The world outside this room was still moving. And where there is movement, there is always a chance. Her heart raced, but she forced her breathing to slow. She placed her hand gently on her stomach. Not now, she told herself. Only when it is right. Fear tried to stop her. It reminded her of everything that could go wrong. But another voice, stronger, answered back. You didn't survive this long to remain invisible. She tested the door, just slightly. A soft sound. She froze. Silence returned. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. She waited again. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, she pushed the door once more. It opened. Just a little. Enough for hope to breathe. Her legs trembled as she stood. The world outside felt unreal. Too open, too bright, too dangerous. Every step forward felt heavier than the last. She moved carefully, like someone walking on thin ice. She followed the shadows. She avoided the light. Her senses were sharp, sharper than they had ever been. Time stretched. Every second felt loud. She could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. She stopped more than once, pressing herself against the wall, waiting for sounds that never came. Then she saw it. A door at the far end, different from the others, not fully closed. Air flowed from beneath it, fresh air, real air. Her eyes filled with tears, not of relief, but disbelief. She reached the door and hesitated, because crossing that line meant leaving fear behind, or facing it completely. She thought of the life inside her. She thought of the promises she had made in silence. And with shaking hands, she opened the door. Light flooded her vision. Not freedom yet, but possibility. For the first time in what felt like forever, she stepped forward not as a prisoner, but as someone choosing her future. For the first time in years, she breathed without the weight of walls pressing on her chest. The air outside smelled different, fresh, unpredictable, alive. Every sound was sharper, every shadow more defined. Freedom felt both strange and fragile. She stepped carefully, one foot in front of the other. Every instinct screamed to stop, to retreat into safety. But she couldn't. She had survived too long to let fear win at the very edge of possibility. The streets were quiet, not the quiet of fear, but the quiet of a city at rest. She noticed small things: a flower growing through a crack in the pavement, a bird calling from a rooftop, the wind brushing against her hair. These simple things reminded her that life still existed outside the prison, and she could be part of it. She walked for what felt like hours. Her legs ached. Her mind raced with questions. Where do I go? Who can I trust? How do I start over? And yet she walked on. Because walking itself was progress. Each step a quiet rebellion. Each step a claim on life. She found shelter for the night. A small abandoned building, safe enough for rest. She pressed her hand to her stomach and felt the life growing inside her. It reminded her that hope was not just a dream. It was tangible, alive, real. The next days were harder than she expected. The outside world was unfamiliar. People stared. Paths were confusing. Food and safety were scarce. But she learned quickly. She remembered every lesson she had learned in silence. Observation, patience, timing. And slowly, the city became less intimidating. She learned to blend in, to move without notice, to survive again, this time on her own terms. She realized something profound. Survival alone is not enough. If she wanted more, if she wanted life for herself and the child, she had to adapt. She had to learn. She had to fight in ways she had never imagined. Day by day, she collected small victories. A meal found, a safe place to sleep, a friendly stranger who offered guidance. Every little step became a building block. Every small success became proof that she could live and even thrive. By the end of the first week, she began to dream again, not just of surviving, but of a future where she and her child could have choice, freedom, and dignity. She whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning, and I will not let the darkness win." For the first time in her life, she felt a small sense of control. Not total freedom, not yet, but enough to make choices. And with that, a thought grew stronger than fear. I will give my child the life I never had. She placed her hand gently on her stomach. The life growing inside her was fragile, innocent, and entirely dependent on her. This gave her purpose, not just survival anymore, a mission. She began to plan carefully where to find safe shelter, where to get food, how to navigate the city without drawing attention. Every decision mattered. Every small success strengthened her resolve. And most importantly, she began imagining a life beyond survival. A life where her child could grow without fear. A life with education, hope, and dignity. She spoke to herself quietly each night. I will teach you what I never learned. I will protect you. I will guide you. These words were her lifeline. They carried her through nights when the shadows of the past felt closest. She realized, strength is not only physical. It comes from promises kept, from a heart committed, from a mind refusing to give up. As weeks turned into months, she prepared for motherhood with intention. She searched for knowledge, how to care for a child, how to survive the city safely, how to raise a child in a world that could be cruel. Her reading, observation, and careful planning became her armor. The darkness of her past had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled her. Her days were filled with discipline, not just for herself, but for the life she carried. She found small jobs, worked quietly, and saved every coin. Her child became her reason for resilience. Her child became her motivation for courage. Her child became her hope made tangible. At night, when she rested, she would close her eyes and picture the future. A future where her child could run freely, laugh freely, and dream without limits. These visions fueled her every step, every decision, every careful move was for that promise, a better life for the child she carried. And in that quiet determination, she discovered her own power. Not the power of strength or skill alone, but the power of love, commitment, and hope. She whispered to the darkness, "You will not break me. I am more than what happened to me. I will be stronger than you." By now, the young woman had settled into her new life, not fully free, but safe enough to plan, to think, to grow. Her child inside her was becoming the center of her world. Every decision, every step, every small action was for the life she carried. She whispered lessons to herself, imagining the child she would teach one day. You must be strong. You must be aware. You must never forget the value of life. She began to explore the city carefully, learning where it was safe to walk, where food could be found, where people could be trusted. Every mistake in the past taught her a lesson now. She became a silent observer, studying faces, noticing gestures, predicting danger. And as she learned, she planned for the future. How she would teach her child survival, courage, and resilience. Days turned into weeks. She practiced small acts of independence, buying food, moving alone, earning small money. She imagined explaining each step to her child one day: how to stay alert, how to protect oneself, how to face the world without fear. Every struggle she endured was now becoming a lesson for the next generation. She also began to notice the subtle beauty in life again: the sunlight on rooftops, the smell of fresh bread in the market, a gentle breeze on a warm day. These simple things reminded her that life could be more than just survival. Her child would grow up knowing safety, knowing hope, knowing love. And in that realization, she found a new kind of strength. She promised herself, "I will not let the past define me. I will raise this child to be free. I will teach, I will protect, I will guide." Because motherhood, she realized, was not only about love. It was about preparing a life for tomorrow with courage, wisdom, and patience. The day finally came. Her child was born. A tiny, fragile life that carried the hope of all her struggles. She held the baby in her arms, feeling both love and responsibility like never before. Every tear she had cried, every moment of fear and despair, was now a memory she vowed to transform into strength. The world outside was still harsh. The streets weren't forgiving, and danger could appear at any moment. But the young mother had changed. She had learned, observed, and grown stronger. She knew how to protect herself and her child. She moved carefully, planning every step, teaching herself patience and alertness. And in her mind, she was already teaching her child the first lessons. Be aware, trust wisely. Fear is not weakness, ignorance is. Every day was a struggle. Finding food, shelter, and safety became even harder with the newborn. The city could be cruel, and people were not always kind. She learned to navigate the world silently, avoiding attention while still carving a space for herself and her child. Even small victories, a warm meal, a safe corner to rest, a quiet moment with her baby, felt monumental. Despite the hardship, she never gave up. She taught herself resilience, and her child grew stronger with every day she survived. She realized motherhood was not only about love. It was about strategy, planning, patience, and courage. The lessons of her own past were now guiding her future. At night, when the city was quiet, she held her child close and whispered, "I will protect you. I will teach you. I will make sure you grow up in a world I will fight to secure." And in that promise, she found a purpose greater than fear, greater than pain. She had survived the worst, and now she would survive for her child. As the child grew, the young mother realized that survival alone was not enough. She needed to teach, not just survival, but courage, wisdom, and awareness. Every day became a lesson: how to observe the world, how to read people, how to protect oneself without showing fear. Her child was learning not just from words, but from every careful move she made. The city was still full of danger. People looked, judged, and sometimes threatened. But the mother had grown wiser. She taught her child the value of vigilance. Look around, listen, trust only those who deserve it. Strength is quiet but unbreakable. Even small things, holding hands in the marketplace, watching shadows, crossing streets safely, became lessons in life. Society was not always forgiving. She faced questions, doubts, and judgments. People whispered about her past, but she ignored them. Instead, she focused on building a foundation for her child. Every day, she reminded herself, I will not let the world take away our future. I will teach, protect, and guide. Her child grew stronger, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. The mother taught more than survival. She taught respect, compassion, and awareness. She showed how courage can exist even in quiet places. The bond between mother and child became unbreakable. Every lesson, every story, every warning was shaping a life that could face the world boldly. Even as challenges appeared, harsh streets, unkind strangers, and societal judgment, they continued moving forward. Because they had each other, and that was more powerful than fear. Her child was learning. Life is not just about safety, it's about strength, patience, and the wisdom to survive and thrive. The child was growing quickly. Time passed faster than she had imagined. And with each passing year, the mother realized her guidance was more important than ever. Life outside was still harsh. The city was full of challenges, and danger could appear anywhere. But her child was no longer a passive observer. Every lesson the mother had taught about awareness, strength, and courage was slowly taking root. School became a new battlefield, not just for learning, but for surviving judgment, teasing, and harsh realities. The mother taught, stand tall, speak with confidence, never let anyone make you feel smaller than you are. She reminded her child that intelligence and awareness were just as important as physical strength. Even in small things, reading situations, speaking wisely, making careful choices, she prepared her child to navigate life safely. Life outside wasn't just about danger, it was also about opportunity. The mother encouraged curiosity, creativity, and resilience. Learn, observe, grow. Your mind is your first weapon, your first shield. Every small achievement, every safe journey across the city was celebrated, because each step was proof that they could thrive despite everything. But challenges never disappeared. Strangers, societal judgment, and unexpected hardships kept testing their courage. Each obstacle became a lesson. Every mistake taught patience. Every small victory built confidence. The bond between mother and child grew stronger, not just out of love, but mutual respect, understanding, and shared survival. But challenges never disappeared. Strangers, societal judgment, and unexpected hardships kept testing their courage. Each obstacle became a lesson. Every mistake taught patience. Every small victory built confidence. The bond between mother and child grew stronger, not just out of love, but mutual respect, understanding, and shared survival. The child had grown into a teenager now. The world was larger, harsher, and far more complex than she had imagined. Her mother had prepared her as best as she could. Every lesson, every word of caution, every story of survival had shaped her into someone alert, aware, and cautious. But the city did not forgive mistakes easily. Every day brought new challenges. School, streets, and marketplaces were tests in themselves. She encountered judgment, teasing, and sometimes danger. But she had learned to observe first, then act. Patience, awareness, and timing became her greatest tools. Her mother reminded her constantly, independence is not just freedom, it is responsibility. Every choice you make can protect you or harm you. The teenager began to make small decisions on her own. Which streets to take, who could be trusted, how to defend herself verbally, mentally, and physically. Every decision was a test. Every successful choice became proof that she could survive on her own. The mother watched with pride, knowing that these lessons were the foundation for lifelong resilience. Yet, life remained unpredictable. Even with all her preparation, new people and situations tested her courage. Sometimes, the mother had to step in. Other times, she let her child face the challenge to learn, to adapt, and to survive independently. Courage is not the absence of fear, her mother often whispered. It is the choice to act despite fear. The bond between them grew even stronger, not just of love, but trust and understanding. The mother had taught survival. The teenager had learned independence. Together, they were unstoppable, a force shaped by hardship, strengthened by resilience, and guided by unbreakable love. The years had passed like fleeting shadows. The child, once a fragile life in her mother's arms, had grown into a strong, alert, and courageous young person. Every lesson, every warning, every story of survival had shaped them into someone ready to face the world. The mother, who had endured unimaginable pain, now saw the fruit of her struggles, not in wealth or status, but in resilience, wisdom, and unbroken spirit. The journey had been long, painful, and difficult. Yet, it had produced something extraordinary, a bond unshakable, strength forged in fire, and the knowledge that even in the darkest times, survival could mean hope, love, and freedom. And so, their story ended. Not with fear,